Hello, mindful friends. Today we're going to be talking about healing fear with understanding and awareness. So if we can understand fear, the role it's supposed to play in our lives to serve us and to help us, and then the ways that it starts getting in the way when it's over-dominating or it lasts too long, then we can use this understanding to start developing an awareness of the fear in our own lives and the role that it plays in either helping us or harming us or making it more difficult for us to engage in our goodness. So we can start by looking into what is fear and the role it plays in our lives. So really at its base, fear is not negative. It's something that's supposed to serve us. It's a protection mechanism. And it's supposed to guide us away from things that might be harmful to our well-being or to our future or our lives. So it's supposed to be a more short-term, quick reaction that motivates us to move, to change, or to do something that's going to protect us. And fear response, those are the fight, flight, or freeze. So in a situation where we are under attack in some way, some kind of threat has come in, that fear response motivates us to do one of these three things. And they come in different forms. Nowadays it's not always like pick up your spear and fight, but it might be that gives us the surge of energy to move or to be strong in a moment. Or we could flight, which then it gives us the motivation to get away from the situation that we're in. Or freeze, which gives us the motivation to pause, to find shelter, to take a break. And these, in the moment, when we're really under a threat and we're experiencing something that could harm us, they're meant to prevent that in that moment. And they do help. When we need it, they really do serve us. And they give us that little bit of motivation to do what's going to keep us well. The problem is when fear gets prolonged or overgeneralized or overreactive. So when fear becomes elongated and it becomes more of like how we are seeing life and how we're interpreting life in every day, that's when it starts becoming detrimental. So it's no longer situational of this moment is a threat, let's react. It becomes more of like life is threatening. And my life is consistently scary. My life is consistently not safe. And we can have perceptions that situations that could be quite docile or harmless, but in our mind and how we're perceiving, they can be interpreted or perceived as threatening. And when this happens, our fear state becomes prolonged. And it becomes more of how we're living and who we're being. And this is what leads us to depression, which depression would be an elongated, prolonged state of freeze mode. So we're afraid of life, we're afraid of engaging, so we go into an over-exaggerated freeze mode. Just stop. I'm not motivated to do anything. Nothing seems great to do. We can also have an over-exaggerated fear response that turns into anxiety disorders, prolonged worry, great stress. And we've all seen it when fear that's over-exaggerated and misdirected becomes a large fight response, which turns into aggression, It turns into anger, abusive situations, and in a larger scale, wars, conflicting nations, or you could say like religious hate. Those are when we allow fear to take over our perception of the world and how we're seeing other people or how we're seeing ourselves and just the challenges of life. If we interpret them as too fearful, then we're consistently in fear response. And we all know that if we stay too much in fear response, so any one of these areas, it becomes life sucking versus life giving. So we do not want to remain here. So now that we understand that and what fear is trying to do and how it can get stuck and lead to prolonged negative states, we can build an awareness that helps us to move out of that. So we can be aware when we're in fear response, when fear is taking over, and just notice. And sometimes, instead of feeling guilty or feeling shame or down on ourselves when we're in a depressed state or we're unmotivated or we have bursts of anger, don't feel shame. Become curious. Look inward and say, what am I fearful of right now? And show yourself a lot of compassion. Because when we're in these states, if they've gotten really big, then the suffering is probably really big. And there's probably some deep-rooted trauma and pain in there that needs to be nurtured. So our awareness of these habits that are kind of built on fear helps us to grow this curiosity and turn inward and ask, what do you need? What hurts right now? What are you fearful of? And this is a hard question because when we are in fear response and we feel vulnerable, it's hard to want to go there, right? We feel safer if we're in the fear response mode. So it can really help to also be super aware of your safe space. Where do you feel safe and where do you feel okay? That you can rest, that you can be real, you can be honest, and you can really look and sit with these things in a caring way. And maybe it's asking for support to be able to do that. But creating this safe space and asking, what is so scary? What are you afraid of? And we'll find, they're probably pretty, if you really get to the root, they're probably, love, belonging, safety, nourishment, shelter, the very basics. And when we feel like those are, it can be really small things that trigger them, that feel like they're threatening them, right? But if it plays into that story that you have of, I'm never going to belong, or I'm never going to be loved, or I'm never going to have enough or be safe. If a little thing triggers that story, it ends up being a big reaction and takes you back into the fear response. And what this does is it builds a bubble around you. You're constantly hardened and you're constantly protecting. And that's really tiring. And it makes it really hard for you to let goodness in. Because you got these walls around you and you're protecting and you're trying to stay safe, but at the same time you're keeping the negative fear response in and you're staying in that state of being. Whereas in order to let the healing happen and in order to engage with the goodness of the world around you, those walls need to soften and they need to start melting so that your heart can open up, that the body can relax, and that the goodness can start entering. And when we start trusting the world around us and we're letting go of these fear responses, it opens up our perspective to start seeing the things that are in the world to serve us, to help us, to nurture us, to keep us well, And we start noticing that the world really is loving and caring if we engage with it in the right ways. And this trust can start opening up space for goodness to enter. And once it starts flowing in, it creates the safety feeling, and it creates the foundation for you to always feel okay. That even if you're faced with a challenge, you don't have to tighten, and you don't have to fight, and you don't have to put up a giant wall. You can rest in that energy of, I call them the heart energies, the love, the peace, the compassion, the acceptance, the gratitude. And you can see their power within you and around you. And those are what shelter you in those moments, so that you don't have to stay in prolonged fear and fight mode, that they become your safety. And then you can feel really relaxed, and you can let the healing in, and you can be engaged in life again, and you can, it's really an absorbing and a receiving of goodness versus fear blocking us from it. So, I invite you all this week to become curious about the places you have fear in your life and where it creates blocks from you receiving goodness. And see if you can start softening and opening a little bit more to start letting the light energy in and finding your safety there. If you enjoy these little talks and would like to join a group session or individual coaching, you can find us at newleafmindfulness.com. I hope to see you very soon.